It's the first part of the third edition of the conference entitled Genealogies of Remembrance. So it makes us very proud that this event has not only been brought once and twice, but it's brought consecutively every year. Every year we are inviting to Warsaw in November celebrated figures and candidates for prominent figures who are dealing with different shades of memory and remembrance. So the overriding theme of this year's edition is transitional justice. And as we all know, history is never outdated, and for most of us, for all of us, it gives employment, and it also breeds hope that perhaps our generation and future generations will learn a lesson from history, and that perhaps our children will live a safer and better life. And if I may, I would like to begin this conference by telling you a couple of words about activities of the European Network, the main organizer of today's event, and later I'm going to mention other organizers and convenors and individuals who have largely contributed to this event and made it possible. So the European Network, Remembrance and Solidarity is a pan-European enterprise. Romania will be joining us next year. We're also collaborating with Czech and Austrian colleagues, and recently Latvian colleagues. One of our objectives is to promote and expand the network in the region, but it's a long-term objective, which is gradually being implemented. We are dealing not only with scientific research, we are not only supporting and reinforcing it, we are not only focusing on science. It's fair to say that we should focus on two issues: supporting cooperation of different institutions dealing with remembrance and history of European 20th century history. And our second objective is promotion of knowledge of the history. So we are trying to promote and propagate knowledge that you are developing and expanding. We're trying to increase its reach to a wide audience which is not dealing with history every day. Our main enterprise, save for genealogies of memory, we are organizing an annual symposium entitled The Memory of Europe in different countries across Europe. So this event is joined by museum experts, researchers, representatives of non-government organizations, and the next session will be held in early April in Prague. And this year, we have launched a long-term project which is meant to remind Europeans on the 23rd of August. As you know, for several years, it's the European Day of Remembrance of victims of the totalitarian regimes. The 23rd of August is obviously the date of the signature of Molotov-Ribbentrop Act. And we want to remind Europeans of what happened then, using different vehicles of communication, and why this date is a breakthrough date for the continent. And another topic I would like to focus on is a project addressed to young people. It's entitled Sound in the Silence. This project encourages young people from different parts of Europe to spend a week or more together in a site of remembrance, for example, the former concentration camps, where they have activities with historians and artists. And they seek for some forms of artistic expressions for emotions which are inspired by them, by this site and its history and its legacy. And today's conference, Genealogies of Memory, is also a long-term project which strives to support and reinforce cooperation of international scientists dealing with memory and remembrance. We also want to create a platform, a meeting venue for outstanding representatives of different fields specializing in memory and remembrance, doctoral students, scientists, and researchers. This year's event has been brought by European Network Remembrance and Solidarity together with Collegium Civitas and the Institute of Social Prophylactics and Resocialization of Warsaw University. Our partners include Open Society Archive seated in Budapest, Slovak National Memory Institute, and the Institute of Latest History of the Czech Academy of Science. So this conference is also funded from the Visegrad Fund. Previous conferences from the series were brought together with the Institute of Social Studies and the interdepartmental unit for social memory of this institute. And such projects always require contributors, people who contribute ideas, concepts, and enormous work. So it's time to thank them for their effort. Dr. Malgorzata Parker and Dr. Stanisław Tyszka are people who this year were accountable for the substantive part of the conference. I would also like to stress that Małgorzata Parker and Joanna Wawrzyniak are authors of the whole series of our conferences. And Collegium Civitas, I would like to stress and thank for support to Dr. Katarzyna Iwińska, Dr. Barbara Markowska, and Ms. Justyna Rogińska. And finally, our organizers from the Secretariat of the European Network, I would like to thank Hanna Gospodarczyk and Agnieszka Nowsowska, and Elżbieta Moczarska and Edyta Mietkowska, who were supporting them in terms of PR. I know that I did not begin this conference with greeting our honorable guests. But nevertheless, we are very proud and honored to have you here during this conference. I'm also very honored that Ms. Małgorzata Omilanowska, the Secretary of State at the Ministry of Culture and National Heritage, has accepted our invitation, and so did Wojciech Węgrzyn, the Secretary of State at the Ministry of Justice. I would like to give a very warm welcome to Dr. Łukasz Kamiński, the President of the National Remembrance Institute. I would also like to greet all guests in attendance. Thank you for coming. Thank you for dedicating your time. Some of you have traveled extensively to Warsaw. Thank you once again. I hope that, and I'm convinced, looking back to previous conferences, that this stay in Warsaw will give you intellectual joy and satisfaction, because you'll be watching the thriving city in Central Europe. Right now, over to Małgorzata Milanowska, the Secretary of State at the Ministry of Culture and National Heritage. Mr. Minister, directors, dear guests, I would like to welcome everyone on my own behalf and on behalf of the Minister of Culture and National Heritage, Mr. Bogdan Zdrojewski. I have to admit that it gives me enormous joy to replace him during the opening ceremony, because the European network, Remembrance and Solidarity, is very close to my heart, and our Polish guests do know that Minister is very busy today because the new government is formed and could not attend this conference. Nevertheless, he has asked me to pass on to you his greetings, and he wishes you a fruitful conference. And from my side, I would like to stress how important it is for us to witness works of the European Network, Remembrance and Solidarity, which for the past several years has been fostering and cultivating the memory of 20th century events in Poland in very close cooperation with partners from other Central European states. The project Genealogy of Memory is one of the key scientific projects which make an attempt at challenging the memory of totalitarian regimes in Central and Eastern Europe and transitional periods. Poland, regrettably, has been very experienced in this respect, but we are not alone in Europe, so we are very glad to listen to other countries' experiences, to our neighbors, to our nations, and we're also keen to share our own Polish experiences. This third conference brought under this project, which is dedicated to justice, seems to be the key. Perhaps its theme is not as popular and resonant with the public as before, but we have so many experts in this room specializing in legal aspects of this term, coming to terms with the past, accountability. It seems to be the key to comprehension, to understanding of different processes that we are witnessing. Many of you specialize in law, so you know from your everyday experience that popular notion of justice is very often a far cry from reality. So every initiative which strives to put the spotlight on the legal aspect of memory, of transforming it into a debate that promotes legal aspects of remembrance, seems to be the key. What is also important is that the European network has found excellent partners to bring this conference together, because Collegium Civitas and Warsaw University are two institutions which have a lot of insight into this topic. So I'm very glad that we have so many European partners and so many European speakers. I would like to thank everyone who have committed themselves to organization to this conference. It gives me enormous joy to see that this event is brought at Warsaw University Library. I think it's a very symbolic fact, because young people come here to learn about the world at large, to learn about history, because the rest they learn from the computer. If they come to the library, they usually come here to read literature and history, and they constitute a generation which luckily did not have to experience all misfortunes that fell on my generation. So the fact that you have brought your conference into this building is very important to me, because there are young people behind this wall who are running down and up the corridor, who are browsing through the shelves. We can make them aware how important are things we'll be discussing, and we can encourage them to ponder on those aspects that you'll be touching on. So thank you once again for inviting me, and I wish you a very fruitful conference. Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Minister. Right now, over to Wojciech, Węgrzyn.
Pani Minister.
Madam Minister, Monsieur Directors, dear guests, after the fall of communism in Central and Eastern Europe, new democratic states and authorities had to face the issue of settlements with perpetrators of repressions and violation of human rights, economic freedom, pluralism, have created possibilities for an open debate concerning post-war development, and it also created grounds for evaluation of what in Central and Eastern Europe was less violent and was conducted at smaller social costs versus other states, for example, Latin American states. So from the standpoint of common experience of the transformation area, what is important is to present and discuss a wide range of political and legal instruments typical for transitional justice, which were introduced in Poland and other Central and Eastern European states after 1989. I had the pleasure and the honor to take part in conference brought by the Prime Minister of Tunisia several months ago, and we've had a discussion which enabled me to look back on those issues and to comprehend how important it is in the context of transformation to get an insight into other countries' experiences. So I was sharing our Polish experiences, which met with enormous feedback in Tunisia, because, as you know, after the Arab Spring, Tunisia is on the right track to political transformations, which are going to make it a democratic state in the future. Of course, many years after 1989, in our part of Europe, politicians, scientists and researchers, lawyers, media and political parties have varied standpoints and stances on transformation, and probably sometimes we find it difficult to negotiate common grounds and arrive at a consensus concerning evaluation of those events. So it's particularly important to appreciate what the European Network of Remembrance and Solidarity is doing. It is documenting and commemorating historical events, which are the stepping stone for New Poland. I've met the director of the network during the European Day of Remembrance of Victims of the Totalitarian Regimes in Vilnius last year. I've also met with him in Budapest, and I have to stress that he's enormously committed, and so are his associates, to promote the memory of victims of different regimes, especially among young people who are usually our key audience. We want them to remember how the world looked like before democratic transformations in Poland and abroad before 1989. Young people in the future will be members of the government, will be decision makers who will be deciding on many vital issues. So once more, I would like to stress that this initiative and this conference is extremely important for the Ministry of Justice, and selection of the location are stressed by Madam Minister. I think it's extremely symbolic. I think it enhances the status of this event. When I read the program and I saw the list of speakers, I regretted that I could only participate in the opening ceremony. I am confident that after this conference, professional materials will be available that will be also distributed to our ministry. And last but not least, I would like to share another reflection, we find freedom extremely valuable, and I don't think that history could repeat. But we are witnessing across Europe radicalization of many Europeans, including young Europeans. So we are very worried by what we are witnessing, and it's yet another argument to remind people who have grown so radical nowadays, especially young people, how important it is to remember victims of totalitarian regimes. I am confident that all those initiatives will contribute to diminishing of radicalism. We won't be probably able to eradicate it, but there is hope. And last but not least, I wish you a very effective conference, and I would like to congratulate to the director and associates on organization of this event. I wish you many successes.
Bardzo dziękuję, panie ministrze.
Thank you, Minister, for these warm words. And ladies and gentlemen, we obviously turn to different milieus and constant elements of existence of our network is a dialogue. And the dialogue must be conducted with a broad group of people so that it can be efficient. That is why we cooperate with different groups of people, different institutions representing different milieus, different views of the world, in order to show to one another that perhaps they are closer to each other than they seem to think. Ladies and gentlemen, in a moment, Dr. Małgorzata Parker and Dr. Stanisław Tyszka will take the floor. They are going to speak English. It is a bit of information for those who may need translation from English into Polish, because it is possible. Both of them are responsible for the content of the conference and for the program to a large extent. And the papers will be introductory papers to the agenda of our conference. Thank you very much for your attention.
So, good morning once again. On behalf of the conference conveners, Stanisław Tyszka and Professor Jerzy Przybań and my own, I would like to welcome you to the conference Legal Frames of Memory, Transitional Justice in Central and Eastern Europe. As was already said, the conference has been organized within the project Genealogies of Memory in Central and Eastern Europe that started in 2011 and is coordinated by Dr. Joanna Wawrzyniak and myself. The overall aim of the project is meant to facilitate academic exchange between Central and East European scholars of individual and collective memory, and to promote this region's study of memory among the broader community, broader international academic community. Within the project, 2 conferences have been organized so far: Genealogies of Memory in Central and Eastern Europe, Theories and Methods in 2011, and Regions of Memory, a Comparative Perspective on Eastern Europe in 2012. And I will use this occasion to invite you to the next conference that will take place the next year, and will be dealing with oral history and the relations between individual and collective memories in the context of the experience of the 1989 revolutions. Selected papers from last year's conferences have already appeared in a special issue of the journal Polish Sociological Review, which you can acquire here at the desk outside the room. And also a collected volume edited European Memory, Eastern Perspectives will appear soon, and it draws also on the discussions developed during the 2 conferences in 2011 and 2012. In parallel to the conferences, we also initiated a seminar series to which we have invited representatives of various regional or local memory schools and projects. So far, we have hosted scholars from the Nordic memory studies, scholars representing French memory studies in Ukraine and in Russia, and the researchers from the Cambridge-based project Memory at War. The seminars are transmitted online so as to enable participation from beyond Warsaw and Poland. And we also plan to continue the discussions begun here through seminars and to maintain contact with you. So if any one of you would like to assemble a panel on transitional justice and memory, you are most welcome. What is common for this and the previous conferences is, on the one hand, an attempt to define the specificity of Central and Eastern Europe as regards history and memory by looking at the changing practices of remembrance in the region in the 20th and the 21st centuries. And on the other hand, a proposal to see history and memory in a broader European and global context, and to search for possible application of memory research in this region in broad international study of social and cultural memories. We are particularly interested in theoretical and methodological questions as viewed against specific historical and geographical contexts. Theories and methods of memory research were the focus of the conference in 2011. That event reflects on the relation between the canonic theoretical concepts of memory and the specific mnemohistoric experience of Central and Eastern European societies. We asked whether the existing matrix of theories that we commonly use, and which in large measure was created to describe the experience of the Western societies, could adequately describe memories and public uses of the past in our region. And conversely, by presenting the original ideas of scholars from this region in the broader European context, we wondered what relevance those ideas might have for broader memory studies. The issues of how adequate and how limited particular memory concepts may be when applied to other regional contexts were relevant too for the conference in 2012. This time, the global framework took us further afield beyond Europe. Central and East European memories related to the experience of mass violence were discussed in the context of comparable phenomena in other regions, including Southern Europe, the Middle East, Asia, Africa, and Latin America. By proposing the perspective of a region in analyzing memory processes, we aimed to broaden the perspective beyond nation, which is often seen as initiating and closing the dynamics of memories in Central and Eastern Europe. Broader references allowed us to observe memory phenomena that are not graspable by the national memory net, and they further helped us to describe phenomena characteristic of a region. For example, migrant memories, borderland memories, ethnic minority memories, and transnational ethnic memories. The guiding idea behind our conferences is to approach memory with historical sensitivity. We wanted to emphasize the seemingly obvious that historical experiences shape particular ensuing memory processes, and that research on memory should bear in mind the tight relation between history and memory, focusing on how historical processes shape memory processes. Social and individual memories are dependent in path and change with reference to the earlier forms. For the last several years, there has been a tremendous expansion of memory studies, also in Central and Eastern Europe. The very word memory has come to be used alternatively to culture, yet rarely bringing new insights. We thus promote historical research as a hope for memory studies to regain their identity. Studies of memory cannot ignore the content of memory that is the past, and should not neglect history as the frame for mnemonic processes. After the first two conferences viewing Central and East European memories and memory studies in a global light, we are now moving to discuss the particular problems of theory and of memory as referred to a particular historical context, namely the relations between memory and law, and the role of justice and memory in transitional societies of Central and Eastern Europe. The role of legal institutions in formation of collective memories of groups, societies, and nations was noted by the father of collective memory studies, Maurice Halbwachs, in his last manuscript, Collective Memory. For Halbwachs, law was increasingly important as a mechanism to establish collective memories in modern societies. He saw legal institutions as powerful tools capable of contributing to the collective conscience of a society. According to him, law, by defining relations of domination and subordination, leaves its visible stamp on social space and thus shapes the collective memory of groups and society as a whole. This is, however, a dialectical relationship, because law also builds on collective memories for its legitimacy and the justification of the rights it provides. Therefore, collective memory must intervene to guarantee the rights which law invests. This conference will deal with the relations between memory and law and with the concepts of justice in regard to societies in transformation. We will be comparing the various countries' experiences with post-communist transitional justice and considering the role of law in the processes of social remembrance in the particular historical contexts. While we will mostly speak of the post-communist processes of coming to terms with the past, comparative references to post-war transitional justice or similar processes in other regions of the world will also appear, which is consistent with the general idea of the project genealogies of memory. And so I will leave the floor to Stanisław Tyszka, who will tell more about our meeting today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to briefly present the idea of this conference. So in Central and Eastern Europe, the demise of communism created a certain ideological vacuum. The values and norms fundamental for the organization of every society were redefined in the processes of political and economic transformation. Also, the historical narratives promoted by communist propaganda lost their legitimacy. In the context of transitional justice, the recent past of East Central European societies has become a subject of contentious and emotional debates. These debates involved historical issues that had been previously censored and could not be publicly discussed. In the processes of coming to terms with the past, an important role has been played by law. New governments had to confront the issue of what to do with the perpetrators of repression and human rights violations. They also had to decide whether and how to compensate the victims. Among the various instruments of transitional justice, we can distinguish between retributive and reparatory measures. Decommunization and lustration were meant to exclude certain categories of communist officials from holding important positions in the democratic state. Other instruments, such as rehabilitation of political prisoners and restitution of nationalist property, were intended as a means of redressing injustices committed by previous regimes. In the process, new value systems were created. The historical roles of victims and perpetrators were defined, and with this, narrative frames for the debate about the past were outlined. Of course, the legal measures have taken different shapes in each country of the region. They reflected different historical legacies, as well as material and symbolic interests, which have entered into the democratic transformation of each society. A legal system is only one of the multiple modes of production of collective memories in modern functionally differentiated societies. In the post-communist transformations, however, the relation between the law and collective remembrance was very particular. In the revolutionary processes of post-communist transitional justice, the legitimacy of law relied on extra-legal, political and cultural factors to a much larger extent than in the well-established legal systems of Western democracies. On the one hand, the law served the state as a powerful instrument for shaping or reshaping collective memories. On the other hand, the law has become a battleground for different visions of the past promoted by various individuals, groups, and institutions of the nascent civil society. The symbolic dimension of law in post-communist societies has often been reduced by memory scholars, particularly from our region, to the domain of state-sponsored memory policies. On the other hand, transitional justice measures have been viewed as purely legal or economic matters, and so they were limited to specialist technical discourses. The aim of this conference is to approach the law as one of social memory frames, as defined by Halbwachs, to make it a proper subject of memory research, taking the post-communist transformation as the empirical ground to discuss the complex relations between law and memory. We wish to discuss the two sides of the relations between law and memory. On the one hand, we want to show the various legal mechanisms through which new visions of the past have been negotiated in the societies undergoing systemic transformation. On the other hand, we want to show law's relation to memory as a field much broader than merely regarding legal institutions, as defined by legal positivism. Such broader approach will include, above all, various civil society initiatives taking place within the legal frames, but sometimes also activities like publications of lists of collaborators or clearly illegal property transfers under the guise of property restitution. A marginal but interesting phenomenon were cases of private justice, when individuals acted upon their own understanding of justice, breaking the law. I'd like to give you two extreme examples of such acts from Poland of the early 1990s. The first case regards a woman descending from an aristocratic family who, tired of waiting years for the execution of a court order, seized her family property with help of armed security guards. Another case regards a farmer who had been ruined and imprisoned by the communist regime. In 1992, when the communist dictator Wojciech was publicly signing his book, the farmer approached him and struck him on the head with a stone. These cases are, of course, not representative, but they do testify to some weaknesses of transitional justice in Poland. In this perspective, I believe that Poland is a particularly interesting place for this conference, because for many reasons the legal measures of transitional justice were here much more restricted than other countries of the region. We will be interested in the intersections of legal discourses with other discourses, including concepts of justice as formulated by historians in various cultural texts and in the media. While discussing processes of collective remembrance and negotiations of the past, we are interested not only with the state level and acts of public officials, but also with the grassroots perspective of social activity. Law plays a role in shaping memories, both by legitimizing certain values, norms, and visions of the past, as well as by framing and inspiring social initiatives in which individuals and groups act towards promoting certain symbolic interests and historical narratives related to them. Thus, whether certain claims to justice can be called successful is determined not only by the fact that they found acknowledgement in courts or legal acts. It is also significant whether and how some claims about historical injustices have affected the dynamics of general discourses about the past, provoking long and emotional debates, while others have failed to gain much public attention. We divided the conference into 7 panels. In the first panel, which will begin in a few minutes, we will discuss and compare the general characteristics of transitional justice and dealing with the past in a few selected national cases. In the second panel today afternoon, we will focus on the dilemmas of property restitution. That panel will be followed by the keynote lecture by Professor Lazar Balkan, who, among other studies on transitional justice, wrote The Guilt of Nations, a comprehensive comparative analysis of dealing with the past through restitution in various parts of the world. We will continue tomorrow with a panel on retributive justice and various ways in which societies dealt with the perpetrators of the crimes of former regimes. The discussion in the second panel will regard the secret police archives and national memory institutes, and the question of how and to what extent post-89 individual and public memories have been based on these sources. The second day of the conference will end with a panel on the role of civil society in shaping the transitional justice discourses. On Friday, we will discuss how justice and various visions of the past are negotiated in or imposed by the courts, both at the national and international level. The conference will close with a roundtable discussion about the shape of historical justice in the light of current legislation. That discussion, which will be moderated by Professor Jiří Příbaň, is also intended as a summary of the conference. I would like to use this opportunity to thank our academic board for helping to conceptualize the conference program. We are very excited to have this possibility to exchange views about law and memory with such a distinguished group of scholars who accepted our invitation. We have here sociologists, anthropologists, historians, cultural studies scholars, political scientists, lawyers, all with expertise in transitional justice and coming to terms with the past in a vast number of countries, not only from Central and Eastern Europe, but also other regions. Thank you very much for coming, and we are looking forward to what is ahead of us.
So we will now begin the first panel on the national and regional aspects of transitional justice discourses, and I would like to invite speakers here. Thank you.